Ruaidhri O'Connor, rugby correspondent of the Irish Independent, is in studio with me. Rory, how's the form?
Hey John, how's it going?
Not bad. So we recorded that a bit earlier on, Rory, and the information at the time was that Johnny Sexton was out because of this HIA. Andy Farrell now saying that he's passed his second assessment and isn't ruled out of next week's test. You're the expert here. What's the situation in your view?
Well, yeah, my understanding was that if you came off with a head injury and failed the HIA, you then went into a 12-day stand-down period under the new World Rugby protocols, which have changed. You used to be able to, if you passed all of your markers, pitch up the next week and play. And we've seen, that was quite controversial. We've seen, a bit of criticism of that over the years, but so World Rugby have stepped in and changed it. But what Andy Farrell said, I have the quotes here. Johnny's good, he's in fine spirits. He's just passed his HIA 2, so he's got a HIA 3 to do in the next couple of days, and he's in good form in there. And he's later clarified, because they pressed him on it in the press conference. He said, because, why didn't you come back on if he's passed in his HIA 2? He said, because they tested him and deemed him not fit to go on, but there's all sorts of different tests to go on. You can stumble in your studs, and not go off. Johnny's fine in there. HIA 2 is passed. HIA 3 will hopefully be passed in the next few days. If that happens, it's concussion, not confirmed. So that is the IRFU. That's what Andy Farrell is, the IRFU spokesperson in this regard. He's done the press conference, and that's the explanation he's given. And I think what he's saying is that basically that Johnny Sexton has not been concussed, or that they think at this stage that Johnny Sexton has not been concussed and thus should be fit to play in 7 days' time. I think if you're in line with the World Rugby protocol, and if you are as firm in your commitment to player welfare as the RFU say they are, I would question whether it's the right thing to do. I would also look at the way they collapsed once Johnny Sexton got injured and say there's an absolutely pressing need to get it back up, for the team to learn how to play without him, because if this happens in a World Cup quarter-final, the show is over. And this is a perfect opportunity to say, Johnny, look, you've got to stand down. We'll get you back for test 3, and we're going to look after you, because you've got a history of these things as well. And we're going to start Joey Carberry this week, and we're going to put Kieran Frawley or Harry Byrne on the bench. So in two regards, I think it would be a wrong decision. I think they've got to err on the side of caution. Obviously, there's very good medics involved. He's getting the best of care. But this
maybe just don't say anything. Maybe just don't say anything until a few days and wait and see.
Yeah, it's fair. I wonder. I suppose he was asked, will he be available, or is he ruled out of next week? And he said no. I mean, he has to answer the question, and he is. He's a reason. He's pretty good at answering questions. Andy Farrell, he generally fronts up to it, and that's where he thinks things are. I do remember he got concussed in the Wales game, in the opening game of the 2020 Six Nations, maybe it was 2021, and he did the press conference that week. They were playing France the following week, and they stood him down eventually.
Okay.
They won't play him if they think that there is a risk. At the same time, he won't be able to train fully next week, is my understanding. So you're on the back foot, and you've got Joey Carberry there. Would you not come out and say, if it doesn't, even just come out and say, Joey Carberry, if he plays number 10, we back him. Like, we're making the same mistakes we've made in the last 2 World Cup cycles. When Ian Madigan was thrown into the quarter-final, having started 4 games in the entire World Cup cycle, 3 of which were against Tier 2 opposition, and the other one was against Scotland in a World Cup warm-up. And 3 years ago in Japan, where Jack Carty started against Japan, having never started a game for Ireland up until the World Cup warm-ups. I just don't understand how we're getting to this.
We're not in a proper position of transition, which we're going to have to anyway, because Johnny's retiring anyway.
Yeah, and that's. I mean, Andy Farrell's looking at that as the next World Cup cycle's problem. But you got to learn from your history. Johnny Sexton is excellent, but he's too important to this team. They're too reliant on him, and he will be 38 at the World Cup next year. And if he makes it through, brilliant. It's a great news story, and all of us who've been warning about this for years will eat our words, and Johnny Sexton will be the hero. And that's brilliant. I mean, I'd be delighted to be wrong, but you've got to be ready for the eventuality. Farrell will point to the fact that Carberry was out for his first year. He'd say he started in France this year, and he got that experience. He's got 60 minutes against the All Blacks in Eden Park, and he played well. But although he played well and did his job really, really well, once Sexton went off, the standards of the team slipped, and they started making loads of mistakes. They lost their strategic direction. They didn't react to the fact that the game was getting against them. They kept trying to play the same game plan. And I think if Sexton's there, he reads the game. He's got a great feeling for the game, and he slows things down, or he goes to a kick focus, and he changes things up. And I really think, like we saw this morning, one of the major red alarm bells of this team is that they're too reliant on Johnny Sexton, and presented with an opportunity to relinquish that reliance or reduce that reliance, they're doubling down on Johnny Sexton again, and they're undermining, like they're sending out the message that we don't trust Joey Carbery, and it's just, I just feel like we're sleepwalking towards another World Cup quarter-final exit. And it's going to be the same story again, and I'm sick of it. Like, it's just like, we got to learn these lessons. Like, David Newsford is sitting beside Andy Farrell in the coaching box. I don't know why. The RFU performance director, he should be seeing these things as well.
Okay, Ruaidhri O'Connor's going to have more with us after the news about Ireland's defeat to New Zealand, 42 points to 19 in the first test in Auckland earlier on today. We've got a break for the news. What did you think of the performance, folks? Many texts coming in on 53106 here on Off the Ball Saturday on News Talk. Don't go away, because we're back after the news. This is Off the Ball Saturday on News Talk. John Duggan with you through until 5. You can text us 53106. We're reflecting on Ireland's 42-19 defeat to New Zealand in the first test in Auckland with Ruaidhri O'Connor, rugby correspondent of the Irish Independent. Our rugby coverage thanks to Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team of us, everyone in. It was almost a mirror image of November, wasn't it, in a way, Rory? Just the ruthlessness of the All Blacks. It's hard to win there. 1994 is a long time since they got beaten at Eden Park, and any time we made a mistake, they just punished us.
Yeah, and I think the problem for Ireland, and what will really they'll beat themselves up about, is that they made a lot of mistakes, and they undermined. They're doing the hard part well. Like, they're doing their attack is very slick and caused the All Blacks all sorts of problems. And they got ahead. And after 20 minutes, I thought the crowd was very quiet. I mean, Eden Park, for all its reputation, it's not a very intimidating stadium. It's quite quiet. It's quite corporate, quite quiet. And it was they kind of lost interest at that point. 20 minutes in, Ireland were on top. The All Blacks were looked like they were struggling. And you've got on top of a team that lost their last 2 matches, that's under pressure, with a coach under pressure, that's had a COVID outbreak all week. You just got to just keep your foot on the floor and score. And they scored 5 points and got no reward for their dominance. And then they lost Sexton and they started making mistakes. And the All Blacks got one really high quality try, and Sever Reece runs the length of the pitch in that moment where Sexton gets injured. And then Ireland they lost their way altogether. They got really headless and they started making really bad errors. And one team you can't make errors against is New Zealand.
Do they not just need to slow it down a bit?
I think that's what they missed. That's what I'm talking about when I think that's what they missed with Sexton, because Gibson Park took a quick tap penalty at a time where really they just needed to take a breather, put it down there,
kick it.
It was beyond Carbery's range, but they just needed to kick it down to the corner and play out. They have the attack game to score tries against New Zealand. Trust it. Now Gibson Park's a tempo player. He's there for his tempo and it works. So you don't want to take away his strengths, but you're at the end of a long season. They're at the start of their season. You got to manage the game a little bit. You're on top of the game. Take control. After New Zealand scored a couple of scores and the momentum was firmly in their favour, he went himself from his own 22 at a time. And I thought he had a good game largely, but there were 2 bad decisions that just summed up a lack of someone kind of saying, "Hang on a second, the momentum's going against us now. Let's take a knee. Let's go down injured. Get the physio. Like, you lose a contact lens. Do something." We saw at RD Survey in the second half when Ireland were on top of New Zealand. There was a warning, and I said, "Hey, can I talk to my players?" He bought his team 45 seconds to a minute of just get a breather on their own line, and they held out. So it's just a bit of game management, a bit of a nous. And I think when they lose Sexton, they lose an awful lot of that, and that's a real concern for me, because that game was there to be won.
There are no other experienced hands who can
There's
step
loads
in.
of them, yeah, there is,
O'Mahony.
but they just seem to defer so much. Like James Ryan, before Sexton's 100 cap, I remember asking James Ryan what makes him stand out, because he was the story of the week. And James Ryan said, when Johnny's not around, you can feel that training just isn't the same as it is. And you're like, it's a nice thing to say about Johnny, but at the same time, it's a terrible reflection on everyone else that they need Johnny to have their standards that high. And, I don't want to kind of harp on about him too much, because there is other stuff at play, but it's a major red flag with this team, and it shouldn't be that way. They're just too reliant on one man to set the tone. Now, like, O'Mahony's leader, and O'Mahony played very well today, but no one seems to be able to raise the standards in the same way as Sexton does. And losing him was really important this morning. It wasn't the only reason they lost. I mean, their set piece was poor. Some of their tackling was poor. Like, Sexton can't do everything for them anyway, but like, it was pretty stark, I thought, this morning. And again, what we were talking about earlier about the fact that they want them back for next week, it just speaks to the reliance on this one charismatic
I
figure.
get what you're saying now in that regard. Like Aaron Smith, some of his passes, like Surveyor, like there was a moment in the second half we just cut Ireland to ribbons.
Oh yeah, I mean, they've got that individual brilliance, and they will get better. But this was an opportunity, because it was their first game. They've had the difficulties of their build up. They're relatively low on they're at a low ebb relatively for where they normally are. Now, they're still always really dangerous. They're still a really, really good team. But like, I don't think they're that much better than Ireland at the moment, and that's what will disappoint Ireland. There was a shot at history this morning, and they made the start they did the difficult part. They got the start. Their attack caused all sorts of problems, but they didn't take their chances. And when it went against them, the floodgates opened, and that's a real, because that happened against the Maori as well in the second quarter. They lost, and it was a much different team, but they lost their way. And you go back to the World Cup review and that talk about performance anxiety and the mental skills of this team. They got rid of Enda McNulty after the World Cup, and then they didn't replace him, and then they brought in Gary Keegan halfway through the cycle, and he's a kind of a part-time consultancy role. You just wonder whether they've solved some of the problems that are there. Again, another World Cup review failing that doesn't seem to have been addressed properly.
What have happened? Somebody might say, well, we beat the All Blacks last November. We were second in the Six Nations. We pushed France really closely in Paris.
And we were in form. And look, Ireland are a very, very good team who showed again. What we're criticising them is that they're not playing to their potential, because they did all those things. Now, a lot of those achievements were at home. I know they won at Twickenham against 14 men, but their scrum was destroyed. Paris was a good performance. The All Blacks was a brilliant win, but it was at home. And you don't diminish those achievements, but you now expect them to kick on. If they're going to achieve at the World Cup, they've got to be able to live in this company, because they're playing either New Zealand or France in a World Cup quarter-final. So it's not like, at the moment, I think Ireland are probably about 4th or 5th in the world. They're a bit off the top 3. They're capable of taking anyone on their day. But when all things are equal and everyone's kind of equally prepped, there are a couple of fundamental issues that are going to undermine Ireland when it comes to the World Cup next year. And I don't think, some of them, I don't think you can solve because the personnel aren't there to do it. Some of them, I think they're almost willfully refusing to see the issues there in the first place. And we're just, I think, sleepwalking towards the same result as ever.
A quarter-final defeat. I don't think we got a prayer at the World Cup. Because
we have a prayer, John, because we know we can beat. Sorry, Ireland can beat New Zealand. Ireland can beat France. We know this, and France will be under enormous pressure if it is France. I think this is going to end the same way. I don't think it's a vintage. I don't think Ireland are as good as, it's not as good a team as they had in 2019. Anyway, I think this is not. They're playing above themselves almost. They've a really good team, capable of great performances. I think they can take anyone out in their day. Like Wales have been to a couple of World Cup semi-finals with teams that are arguably less talented than this Irish team. I don't think they haven't got a prayer. I just think that if Porter goes down, Furlong goes down, or Sexton goes down, it's all off the table.
That front row. So Porter was on for the whole game. Furlong was on for 70 minutes. That is a glaring.
Especially when they're playing the All Blacks next week and the game was over at half time. So if you trusted your backups, you'd whip the two of them off and get them fresh for next week. But they couldn't, because Cian Healy, I think, wasn't fit. He was there in case of emergency. He got injured on Wednesday. They probably would have played Finlay Bealham, but and Tom O'Toole off the bench. I think they might have whisked Healy out off the bench if they had been available. But Bealham went down with COVID, so they had to pick him. But it just showed he wasn't fit. He got injured on Wednesday. It's amazing they were able to select him at all. But Tom O'Toole, I suppose, that was the biggest game of his life, and they were unsure about putting him in that company. But if he's in the Ireland squad and he's an Ireland player, that's what he's there to do. You got to trust him to do that job, and especially when the result is gone. I know you don't want to lose by a record score and things go really horribly wrong, and you don't want to damage the player either. But you need Furlong fit for next week. You've just, those guys are going to be really drained Monday, Tuesday next week to try and build up towards next Saturday when you need them again. And then, Sheehan nearly went 80 because Dave Heffernan came on and got a head injury and had to come off again. So that's like your 3 front rows with very little cover have a lot of mileage in this week, and they got to go again next week, whereas the All Blacks have resources and seem to trust their bench an awful lot more. Is
there a depth? Obviously there's a depth issue in the front row. Is that something we can improve in the next 18 months?
No, because you can't go out and sign somebody. And what you do is you hope, you work your ass off on all the options who are there to try and improve them to the level where they're able to come in and affect the game. But
like Tadhg Furlong, for example, was it obvious that he was going to be the man?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, he was earmarked from a long way out. He went to the 2015 World Cup as the kind of the bottom prop, as almost a development experience, and then they were able, because they had Mike Ross, they were able to kind of bring him in. But there's no Tadhg Furlong or Andrew Porter really. There are players who are maybe 18, 19 who are there, but this World Cup cycle is probably too soon for them. Injury's an issue. I mean, you would have had Dave Kilcoyne on this tour if he wasn't injured. So I mean, he will come back into the mix. But again, he's 33 or 34 now. It's a light area. We don't produce men of that size, very easily. So you're looking at kind of the options across the provinces. Even when they're looking at calling up Ed Byrne. Ed Byrne's barely featured for Leinster any big games this season. You know,
Michael Bent was training him.
Michael Bent was, that was kind of a needs must. He's in the area kind of thing. But yeah, the Conan O'Donnell, the Sligo prop who plays over there as well, he was in training before the Maori game, I believe. So they're basically being smart and going, we've an Irish guy here, let's get him in for a few days. But like, you know, Michael Bent's 36 and he's pretty much retired, and Edburn will arrive. But it's worrying. It's really worrying because, you know, Furlong was showing signs of stress towards the end of the season with his back. Porter, I believe, is carrying something, and that's probably undermining what he's able to do with the scrum. It's his first season as a professional loose head as well. He only made the switch. He was picked as a tight head on the Lions tour last year, and now he's starting for Ireland in the number 1 jersey and going 80. He's such an important player for them now. So it's definitely an area of concern, but it's not an easy fix. Positives then in the team today? Well, I think the reason to be so frustrated is because there was positives. There was loads of positives. The way they started the game was exceptional. The try they scored after a couple of minutes through Keith Earls was really, really good. Their handling was good. Their accuracy was good. They did it again in the second half. They put together some better, like their attacking phase play was better than New Zealand's. New Zealand just had this incredible ability to strike and to make the most of your mistakes and create something out of nothing, whereas Ireland actually created an awful lot. So their attack is really, really good, and that's supposed to be the hardest part of the game to do. Their line out and scrum, you would imagine, is fixable. I mean, the scrum, there is a size part of it, but there's also a technique part of it. And you know, channel one, just get it in and out. If you know you're going to be under pressure, do it really quickly, get it in and out, just solid, stable and out. Obviously on their ball you're in trouble, but New Zealand are generally a positive scrummaging side who want to play off it as well. I wasn't expecting the scrum to be a problem on this tour. I think it's more South Africa, France. Or France, yeah. Well, that's a bit of a worry that New Zealand are applying that pressure as well. Line out, again, fixable. There are good players in the squad who could bring in to freshen things up, like Jordan Larmour, potentially Ryan Baird is a big impact player. Someone like Joe McCarthy, the young guy from Leinster, he didn't go great against the Maori, but he has a lot of size, a lot of power, and they're over there to find out about these guys. Well, that's what we found out with Dan Sheehan. Dan Sheehan has become a bigger player now, hasn't he, in the last year? Yeah, and like, he had to bide his time. So Roland Kelleher, Herring was there to start, then they promoted Kelleher, and then it was Kelleher and Herring, and then after a while Sheehan has nudged Herring out of it. And they are missing Roland Kelleher an awful lot, because I think he is a big scrummaging hooker, whereas Sheehan is an incredible athlete, but he has a bit of a way to go at the elite level in his scrummaging, and that's part of the depth problem. That's, they've backed him now, and he's getting incredible experience, and it's better he's not even making mistakes, but he's learned, himself and Porter and Furlong as a front row will benefit from this experience. They will be better for the fact that they've scrummaged against the All Blacks 3 weeks in a row, and that is part of it. Like, if you're making mistakes, as long as you're learning from them, it's good. It's just some of the solutions seem beyond them. Like, they just can't magic up a world class, another world class front row. They're not using their bench an awful lot. I think they could get more out of that. And Carberry went well. I know I said when Sexton went off, standards dropped, but I thought individually Carberry was very good, and he looked really dangerous in attack. They got over the New Zealand line, I think, 5 times without scoring, if not more. I mean, that's a lot of opportunities that they created, and they just need to finish them. If they finish them, it's a much tighter game. So there were positives there, and it wasn't. They could have folded at half time. They just conceded 28 points in 20 minutes, and they won the second half. It's not worth anything to them except for the fact that they didn't get hammered out the gate. Everybody was agreeing, by the way, with my thought that we haven't a part of the World Cup. That's just people piling on Twitter. So it'll be the moment where we least expect it. I mean, the closest Ireland have ever come was in 1991, where we were the most amateur in combos that we've ever been. Now, we were at home. It did. You're right, though. In the Michael Lina game, that still has scars, I think, in many people's minds. I think we could capable of winning a quarter final, but it's then winning 3 games is the issue. Look, a lot has to go right. The big thing going for them is that they play South Africa and they've got a 2-week break before they play Scotland, and then it's week on week on week. So they should be able to get enough together to beat whatever happens against South Africa. And look, they can beat anyone. They are good enough to beat anyone in the world. They are a really, really good team. They're just shallow, and if they lose one of 3 players, they're in major trouble. And I think with the out half one, that's of their own making, because they do have options and they're refusing. But the props to use is more props. There's a now Tom O'Toole could come out, benefit from the experience, and then he becomes a really good tight head prop, and that takes the pressure off Furlong. Lou said just the age profile of the reserves is a big concern. So, and they've had a lot of guys in, and they just don't seem convinced by them, because you also have to be able to. Scrummaging is the main part, but you also have to be able to play the passes that Furlong and Porter do, and do all the other stuff that's part of it. So that is a major concern. But look, if they had the 15 that went out today and put it up to the All Blacks, if they had them in a World Cup quarter final next year with a better bench, there's no reason why they can't. It's getting to that point with those players is the concern. Yeah, 5-3-106. As far as rugby goes today, I think this Leinster experiment has gone badly wrong.
Time to pick from all 4 provinces, is one of our texters. I think we got to look at the post-sex in Ireland, says another. We're too reliant on him. Not sure if Carberry's the answer, though we did okay today. I think we did well overall today. Some hope for next week. Peter Mahoney, excellent, but also coming to the end when looking at 80 minutes for the World Cup, question mark. Sheehan, great all round. Henshaw, great in the second half, says Tommy in Cork. Hey folks, can we look at the referees' decisions on scrums and Josh van der Fleer getting smashed at a number of rucks? The All Black scrums seemed to get a reset every time they were under pressure and hit the deck when we got a penalty against, very similar to the Mary game. I saw kind of a lot of stuff on Twitter about some of the refereeing decisions. Yep. Was that a legitimate comment? Yeah,
I think it was. I don't think it was the reason New Zealand won the game, but certainly Scott Barrett should have been sent off. He made clear contact with Josh van der Fleer's head of the ruck with no arms involved either, and it was penalty only, and they didn't go upstairs for it. The New Zealand TV director was very selective in what he showed afterwards. There was another one where O'Mahony was like, please, go back and look at what happened to Josh van der Fleer earlier, and they didn't go back and look, and I rewound it to try and see, and couldn't get a clear picture of it, but it looked like he was certainly smashed at a ruck, but I don't know how legal it was. The scrum, the scrum is so inconsistent across referees, but you got to adapt to that. Like, it's not, the ref isn't going out to whistle Ireland off the park. He's seeing pictures that he doesn't like, and he's reacting to them, and it's up to Ireland to solve that problem. And part of that, one thing coaches do is they bring on the subs because they paint a different picture. Ireland aren't doing that, so that's a major issue. The ref was, I think, his interpretation of the breakdown frustrated. I think Quinny alluded to the fact that Ireland are pretty frustrated about what the ref was doing. I mean, even Joey Carberry's try probably should have stood. If not, I thought it was a harsh high tackle call, but it probably was a high tackle. And if it was a high tackle, then it's a penalty try. Yeah. But again, you're chasing the game at that point. You've already, really, the referee had nothing to do with the 28 points that Ireland conceded in succession. that's the game. Fundamental problem. Yeah. But the ref was, and it is major frustration at this level of rugby when the refereeing isn't great.
What does Farrell and his coaching team do now over the next few days? Is it just what they normally do to prepare a team for another test, or are there kind of techniques? Do they let them just have a couple of days off? Or
no, I think it's too early in the tour. I think they usually do that maybe in the last week to kind of just release the steam at this or blow from steam at this stage of the season. But I believe they're staying in Auckland for a couple of days, which means they're not going to travel until later in the week. They're going to enter Dunedin, the tip of the South Island, and while the weather's been quite benign in Auckland, it could be quite hairy down there because it's next up Antarctica. They'll just review it. It was a bad defeat in terms of the scoreline, the fact they conceded 6 tries.
He was quite positive actually.
Yeah, he was I thought it was a very interesting interview. He was very positive, and I think that's the way they'll feel. They feel like that was within their grasp. That's what will annoy them this week. That it was their own mistakes that let New Zealand into the game, and if they can tighten things up, I think Quinny said it as well, and control control the ball when they have the ball, and not gift tries to New Zealand. They got to learn these lessons. But the problem is that the Mary game showed what could go wrong if things go wrong, and they didn't really learn that lesson. And I think personally, I think they should back Carberry and say to Sexton, look, you get yourself right for test 3, and just go in with a really positive mindset. Maybe freshen up the team. Maybe bring in a Jordan Larmour to give them a different picture to look at. I mean, Keith Earls has gone 100. Sorry, he didn't go 80 today. I mean, it was weird. I don't know why he played 80 against the Maori if he was going to be starting the test on Saturday. I thought it was a really strange call. But yeah, I think it's a pretty normal week. There's no reason to panic based on today. I know they conceded 6 tries and it was a big score, but they did a lot of stuff right. It's just that's what happens when you get things wrong against the All Blacks. They've still got a very good chance against down in Dunedin on Saturday, and I don't think there's any reason to panic just yet.
So Carberry and Larmour, anybody else that you'd like to see?
Yeah, I'd like to see Baird involved in some frame. I mean, Tadhg will benefit. Tadhg Beirne hasn't played since the Six Nations, and he was quiet compared to his normal self, but he'll benefit from the fact that he got 60-70 minutes in there. But I really think Baird gives you something different coming in off the bench. He's such a brilliant athlete. I would like to see them try a 6-2 split on the bench and pack a lot of power. I know Bundyaki almost does that job anyway. I mean, they could look to freshen it up with him. He was very good off the bench today. The centres were good as well. Maybe that works, having him on the bench. But I wouldn't go swinging an axe in there. I think it was a good team effort that went awry. I think you almost backed them to go and learn their lessons this week.
5-3-1-6. Looks like Ireland are not going to get into another World Cup semi-final next year. New Zealand are a different animal at home and in the World Cup. Everybody's just so That's the way we work. We win.
I think when it's become such a self-fulfilling prophecy. I do think it's when we least expect it. It'll be like the time that the players revolt, like England in 2007. That's when it will happen. All this stuff about the stuff we talk about with planning is going to go. It's all
we just on the day. Thoughts on bringing Marty Moore to cover Tidehead. Also, could we convert Callagher to Loosehead, played in school college, to provide more depth? Says Ronan.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, Moore's injured at the moment, so that's another one scratched off. But they've never really liked the look of Marty Moore. I think if they got him in for World Cup pre-season and got him right, he could be an asset for them. He's a very good scrummager. Like Andy Warwick up in Ulster is a good scrummager. He doesn't do an awful lot else, but he could have done a job for them over there. But they went with this philosophy that anyone who comes has to be a viable World Cup contender. I wonder if they will regret that in the end, because they only were 40 players and they've had to call up 3 from their holidays, which hasn't worked out very, very well. But they've gone with Ed Byrne ahead of the starters in other provinces because he knows the system and he's probably more the kind of player they want. But he's Leinster's third choice Loosehead. It's not an ideal scenario, and it speaks to maybe a lack of alignment from the system gets a lot of credit for being aligned, but the guy started out half on Wednesdays, the number 12 at Leinster. They're bringing out Leinster's third choice Loosehead prop today. It's a bit muddled.
We need Bulk and Gavin Coombs. The answer is Doris was anonymous. Is Dennis in Wexford?
In fairness, Doris didn't have a great game, and Coombs would look very, very sharp on Wednesday. So, Doris is a brilliant player, but maybe Coombs off the bench is a good option. Like Jack Conan, he was on the Lions last year. That's been a long shift. So was Byrne. You wonder whether these lads, that's in their legs as well. Conan maybe could do with a rest and get him back fresh next season, and Coombs give you something different. He certainly gave the New Zealanders something to think about coming off the bench for the last 20 minutes, half an hour. I wouldn't drop Doris though. I think Doris is too good and has an awful lot to offer.
Look, everybody wants to play for Ireland. Everybody, I'm sure, is buzzing going down there. They're very well looked after, as Quinny said. But it'll be a long season, and even for the Leinster lads, psychologically, it was a tough end of the season. Is that in any way a factor?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, I think it has to be. They're questioning themselves, and there was moments that reminded me, there was a time where Sexton and Keenan got the ball in the backfield, and it almost reminded me of that moment in La Rochelle, or in the game in Marseille, where they got their lines crossed and basically invited the La Rochelle pressure on. They got out of the system, but I was like, that's in their heads. They've lost 2 really big games, and that confidence that they had. You talked about the New Zealand game into the Six Nations and the Triple Crown. That has to have been eroded. And you start second guessing yourself, and you're a long way from home, and you've been, you got your holidays coming up, and you can only ring your family between a certain time of the day because the time zones are really awkward, and it gets dark at 5 or 6 o'clock. So you've lost heavily. If things go badly this week, I think that will start kicking in for the following week. It becomes a problem when you're asking big front row players to play 70, 80 minutes, I think, because they've got a lot of mileage under their desk. Now, they're well looked after, all that sort of stuff, but I think there's a point in that. Their confidence has been rattled, and they're at the end of a long, long season, and that they can see the finish line, and that can be a dangerous thing. And I think if you look at the history of Ireland's, certainly pre-Joe Schmidt, if you look at the history of Ireland's final games on tour, it's not a pretty picture, and 60-0 is the one that stands out in the big flashing lights there, and that is, I kind of feared that there was the biggest first half deficit today since that. In 2 weeks' time, you just wonder what shape they'll be in. So, but you hope that they've moved on from those days where they can keep focus for another week, and it's part of the World Cup. But there's worries, there's definitely worries.
We've hardly mentioned his name, Joe Schmidt.
Yeah, it was hard to know what influence. It's really Foster was back. He wasn't on TV today.
It's a nice headline.
He
I think
kicked an awful lot in the first half, so I wonder it was that part of it. But certainly, having him in there can't but help them. I think his role will be reduced, but he's definitely in the background. He's definitely pulling some strings there, and that he will be a central figure for them over the years. But yeah, no, he kept a low profile today. There wasn't much footage of him going around.
No, he wasn't in the. They usually have the 3 of them, don't they, in a row?
Yeah.
And he wasn't in the camera shot.
Yeah, he's in the shadows.
Australia beating just narrowly, was it 2 points?
Well, they conceded 2 late tries. So they actually they hockeyed England, and then Harry Arundel, the London Irish winger, came on and just changed the game. But it was too late to win the game. But Australia were down to 14 men for a long time in that game. There was a second row headbutted. I've forgotten both of their names. There was a headbutt, and the Australian player was dismissed. And they showed incredible spirit. They looked like a really good team. They scrummed England off the park, and they have now put incredible pressure.
Darcy Swain and Johnny Hill.
Yes, that's it. I was working while watching the game, so I wasn't giving.
Well, I've just read it off here because I was.
But they've heaped incredible pressure on Eddie Jones now. Their old friend is down there, and he's under enormous pressure now. If they don't win if they don't win the second test,
or if you got the finger on the trigger, do you think?
He's very powerful in there, and you wonder whether they are starting to think, could they do what South Africa did with Rassie Erasmus in the last World Cup cycle, and could they, Scott Robertson's going to be in town to coach the Babas in November, the Crusaders coach. Is it time? I mean, as you run out of ideas, they've been really poor for 2 years now. They were so good in that World Cup semi-final, but that credit,
they didn't win it. They didn't win it.
I know, and he hasn't really had it since. The resources, the players he has. They were poor today, and the Australia beat them well and deserved it. It sets it up. I mean, I love these 3 test series. It's probably the last time we're ever going to have them, and I just think they take on the life of their own. And
why is that?
They're going to go to this World Series, the kind of biannual kind of World Cup style, or not World Cup, but it's an annual
the league,
World Champion kind of thing. Yeah, League of Nations kind of thing. So that's going to replace the 3 test series, which is really sad. I really like these series. I think they take on a life of their own. And England, Australia has something, like England down in Australia. There's something really brilliant about that.
So Eddie Jones, the whole argument with him is, well, forget about everything but the World Cup. But you can't really, can you?
Well, you're putting a lot of faith in a guy to get it right in the night, and he has a very good track record, but he also burns out. He's so intense. He's burned through an incredible array of assistant coaches. I think he's maybe on his 3rd set of assistant coaches at this stage, if not more. And he's so intense. He's so demanding. He has a shelf. All coaches have a shelf life. Think of Joe in the last World Cup cycle. It didn't get that far. And I just wonder, he seems to have gone back to a lot of the players he already discarded. Both Vinopolas were playing today, but they were thrown out with the rubbish only a year ago. So he's scratching around a bit. Now Arundel was really, really good, and you wonder whether they found something there, and whether they, with Marcus Smith, and they can kind of gel that into something. But they're kind of scratching around for things, and it's very late in the World Cup cycle, and there is an outstanding candidate out there who was overlooked by the All Blacks, who has a point to prove, who wants to take the next step in his career. And I mean, the RFU are in a position where they can make an offer he can't refuse. So I think it's maybe a bit of watch this space there.
Finally, I was looking at in the television screen there earlier on in the studio, and the stock of Ronan O'Gara is quite high, isn't it? The share price is really, really high at the moment, and he could be an England coach, he could be an Ireland coach.
Yeah, well, he's certainly left the door open for the RFU if they wanted to come. I think Ronan's on his own. He's marching to his own beat. I think there's kind of he's taken every step. He's built his career so cleverly. He's even his media work, it's so impressive, and it kind of keeps.
And it's open.
It's very open. I thought he was really good this morning. I thought he kind of summed things up really, really well. You would hope, and David Nisfor has said that the conversations are happening, that there is a line of communication there to O'Gara. I mean, to me, he's the obvious next Ireland head coach, and if they are, if you let him go to England, that's crazy. That's unless he thinks that somehow it's a way of kind of preparing himself for the big job, which
win the World Cup in England.
Yeah, well, if you're a professional coach, you kind of have to. We've got an English coach, so why couldn't England have an Irish coach? It would be quite funny, but also a bit controversial, I think, if he took it. But why not? You can't have Jack Charlton and Andy Farrell as kind of as our coaches, and then give out when an Irishman goes over and does it over there. But we don't know what Andy Farrell's intentions are post. I think his contract's up in 2024. He's going to do a year after World Cup. Now, obviously, that could be. There's a 6-month break clause in all these contracts. We don't know what he's going to do after the World Cup. England will want them. If Eddie's gone after the World Cup, they may go after Farrell. Might open the door for O'Gara. O'Gara may feel it's not the right time. I think it probably is the right time. He's achieved an awful lot at La Rochelle already, and I think it will be an incredible appointment. To get an iconic Irish a former player who's turned himself into a world-leading coach, and who's also able, for the brand, for the RFU, to have a spokesman who's that good and so open in the media will take them to another level as well. So he's his career has been fascinating so far, and the next stage will be even more interesting. We've
talked a lot here. Ruaidhri O'Connor from the Irish Independent, the World Cup next year, the next Irish coach, and we only have 2 tests to go.
That's it. Cheers, John.
Ruaidhri O'Connor from the Irish Independent in studio with us, reflecting on Ireland's defeat to New Zealand, 42 points to 19 in Auckland this morning. We're back after the break here on Off the Ball Saturday on News Talk with our racing slot with Johnny Ward.